we go. Better than that. That's not how that goes. FCC ruling on drills and employees. These, yeah, there are rules by the FCC that we have to follow too. These are some of the things that if you don't take one of these courses, you don't really know most of the time. And this is kind of basic background that you have when you took your test. FCC prohibits use of amateur radio for the benefit of an employer. So like, well, we use a simple one. Pizza delivery guy cannot use ham radio to call back to the pizza shop and say, hey, Luigi, where's this pizza go? I've actually knocked people off for that in New York City over the years. The pizza shops did that. New exceptions. Under certain limited circumstances, it is possible to do. Let's see what those are. Okay. During a disaster preparedness drills or non-government sponsored, can employees of entities let's see. This looks like we're into a test. Non-government sponsored drills limited to 1 hour a week. This jumped right into some of the rules. The non-government sponsored drills, they would be like not for example the county or the municipalities or anything like that. But, if we were to have, and we do, if we were to have a company of some kind that sells emergency equipment and they'd want to do a drill, we'd limit it to 1 hour a week, twice in a calendar year. Can be up to 72 hours, but now it's once 1 hour a week, so it is all you're allowed to do. But now an ARES member using an employee provided station to check into local ARES net as an individual is not necessarily transmitting on behalf of the employer. Hospitals, for example, they have radios at a lot of hospitals. I'm currently working on getting that list together so that we can all go and as a group or individuals go tour some of these places where they are. And I'm working with Ralph here in Dauphin County to find where they're all located. They were put in maybe 15, 20 years ago and they got lost in the shuffle. Now, I don't know how this ended up into the middle of a quiz, but 1 hour a week is the answer to this one. We'll just go through this. Oh, it is wrong. There is no limit for government-sponsored drill on behalf of. What is the maximum amount of time a radio amateur can participate in a government-sponsored drill on behalf of their employer? Government is no limit. The other one was amount of time a radio amateur can participate in a non-government sponsored that we know is 1 hour a week. Your employer wants you to design and operate an amateur radio system between office buildings so his business can still function if the phones and internet are down. He says that for him, no phone is an emergency. No phones is an emergency. Should you do it? No, that's that's prohibited. That'd be using it as a.
Hey, baby. You know what time it is?
That's the stupidest stuff they put in these.
Yep, right on time.
Now, I have to go through that again. Some of these elements are just so stupid and short, and I apologize for that. I didn't write them. This is your ARRL doing that. Open 7E. We're on to 8. And we'll start. NTS. We've gone over this so many times, so we'll just go through this. Every formal or directed net has one net control station, one net control operator, and skills are critical. So what do you need? When do you need a net control station? Formal nets, they maintain order. often large amounts of stations checking in, large volume of messages. You got informal, when you're on standby, you can elevate to a formal net at that time. Around this area, we have informal nets, which are like chit-chat get-togethers that appear on some of the repeaters. That's kind of that same thing. Well-trained NCS operator manages routine versus emergency traffic, knows the difference. Personable, keeps his cool, organized, no loss or misdirected messages, and is quick to absorb changes. So here you have to think on your feet. We've covered a lot of this. The right stuff: clear speaking, voice, enunciation, proper handle stress, tune out distractions, have good hearing. Well, that leaves me out, but I got headphones, so that works. Write legibly. I have a computer to type on. Proper skill set that you learn here. Yeah, I do try to write better when I'm actually doing these. Transferable skills, a well-designed station so that the next operator can come in and sit down and take over, I would imagine. Good basic amateur radio operation, knowledge of radio programming, that's important. The way a lot of the stuff is on VHF and UHF now, programming a radio without having a computer to do it is important. We've covered that a number of times. People have shown up at places where their radios are not programmed for, and then there becomes a problem because they say, well, we always use chirp, for example, to program it, and we're out in the middle of nowhere, nobody has chirp. And frequency selection on HF is important. You have to have a little bit of knowledge of the HF spectrum, and that's where your net control station usually has that knowledge and knows where to take you for the net and knows how to handle pileups. If you've never been on the incoming end of a pileup, it's quite an experience. You hear everybody calling you, and you have to develop a system from your experience on how to pull them to get them all taken care of. Skills you learn: how to be a team player. You need and how to be leadership. How to keep your records of everything you're doing. How to delegate responsibilities, internet control systems, and NIMS. You'll learn all that as you go along, pretty much. And that's what some of the other courses that you were taking from the FEMA help you to get an idea of some of that too. And nothing's better than actually practicing hands-on. Check into local nets if you have license privileges on HF. There are quite a few at the upper end of 75 meters, and they're also on 40 meters where you can get into them. Get involved in public events, become a backup net control station. Don't wait for an emergency to learn it. Around here, Skywarn's been asking for people to come on and help out with net control. We're getting a rotation going. Bob is handling that. The rotation of people to practice on Monday on our net and handle traffic and so forth. That's part of the practicing before the emergency hits. It's really vital to have hands-on. And it's like if you're learning a musical instrument, you can read all the books on it, but until you put your hands on that musical instrument, you won't know. Same thing happens here. Net control stations are not superhuman. They do need breaks. They're not the scheduler, they're not the recruiter, and they're not in charge of the overall communications event, but you have to know how to handle your job anyway. Any thoughts, comments, or questions before we go on? The primary purpose of a standby in the NCS format is to make certain that the informal sharing of information flows smoothly, to encourage others to join in the informal conversations, to upgrade the net to formal status if it becomes necessary, or to acquire monthly service points. The answer for that one is to upgrade the net to formal status if it becomes necessary. You're there ready to go. An NCS operator is responsible for which of the following: being in charge of the overall communications effort, being in charge of the net during his shift, being in charge of the net operation beyond his net and shift, and being in charge of the frequency, schedules, and recruiting. Your B here. Be in charge of the net during the shift. You don't worry about the other things yet. What is the least desirable time to train a new operator? A, during an emergency. Now, what is a tabletop exercise? Tabletop exercise, I'll go over that quick here. Tabletop exercise, you meet in a situation room. Situation rooms are full of tables with signs above them, and they indicate what agency those people at that table are working for. And during that tabletop exercise, it's handled as if it were a real emergency, but instead of being on the radio, you're yelling back and forth to each other, or you're passing messages to each other and so forth. That's tabletop. A training net is actually on the air, and the rest of them you kind of know. Which best describes the primary mission of the NCS? Train net operators to understand the ICS system, help the net to move as much traffic as possible in the least amount of time accurately and efficiently, or to tune out distractions and focus on the job at hand in an often noisy and chaotic environment. Well, we're going to say C, but that's exactly what it is. And D is interesting because you will learn how to tune out distractions in a noisy and chaotic environment. You'll get the hang of that eventually. Which of the following does not represent the right stuff to become a good NCS? The ability to handle mental physical stress for long periods, the ability to write legibly, the desire to be seen as important in a response despite the lack of training, or above average operating skills. This is not what you want to be. You don't want to be thinking you're important. Even though we have an important job to do, we're just one of the workers. Now, file. And we're going to 9. Number 9, operating practices. Before opening that, all stations heard from this location. Is there a minimal disruption? Okay, first you want to know if you can hear all the stations where you're located. Is there minimal disruption at this location? Is it the best antenna for it? Is there battery backup? Do you have a headset with noise canceling microphone? That's a good thing to have. A lot of people have their own. Heil is big in selling them. I have Telex. They all work fine. Heil just seems to tailor his stuff more to ham radio. With the noise canceling microphone, those mics are right up at your face, and you can turn the mic gain on your radio down when you have them. That's why you don't hear the background when somebody's using one. And before operating that, what supplies, office supplies will last through the shift? You got to make sure you have all that. UHF and VHF repeaters in your area that you're working with, liaisons, loggers, backup NCS people, relief operators, make sure they're all available. And open and closing the net, scheduled nets, emergency nets, training. Well, scheduled nets, you get the training, and emergency nets are the real deal when you need them. It's best to use a script to open and close a net. You'll hear that on every net. Another one that I would encourage people who are on HF, ECARS, ECARS, ECARS is looking for members, and they're looking for people to be net operators. It is an excellent place to train to run a net. And you'll have, they have a great script to open it. If anybody's so inclined, listen to the net, 7.255. It covers the East Coast, and it was originally designed to be an assistance to motorists who are driving along using their ham radios. Obviously, this goes way back. It's now become a way to check your radios, make sure everything's working, but it still caters to the mobiles first. Calling the Elmer Fudd County Emergency. Now, this is an example of the of your script. This is a directed net. All stations must call the net control only. This net is handling only emergency traffic and priority traffic at this time. Only ARES stations assigned to this net should participate. Once checked in, please check out with the net control before leaving the frequency. Stations with emergency traffic may check in now or break in the net at any time. That's how they're read, very deliberately. The precedence here, emergency takes highest priority, priority traffic next, health and welfare is next to the bottom, and routine stuff is below that. When emergency or priority traffic shows up, let it run first. Emergency usually is about health and life and death situations many times. Priority is just under that. Primary job of the NTS is to ensure that the messages with the highest precedence are sent first. Asking for check-ins immediately after opening script and periodically ask for check-ins. State often what type of messages are being handled. Check-ins with traffic are first by priority. Ask for the check-ins at least every 15 minutes and verify check-ins by repeating the call sign. When you get a check-in, repeat their call sign back to verify it on any net. And all of these work for every net. Now, on our local nets for, like say the Ham Radio Club, Harrisburg Amateur Radio Club, it's usually over in about 20 minutes anyway. But even so, several times ask for check-ins who are late coming. If it's a net that goes on forever, 15 minutes is a good number. Studies show that this is, and unkeying before the call sign just wastes time. And you'll notice that there are a lot of nets that do that. They say this is, they unkey, and they key up again and send their call sign. I don't like that operation. I know that we use that sometimes, and that was started in our area some years ago on Skywarn. So just keep that in mind when you're doing a net and people start doing it. That's something that needs to be spelled out, how you check in the preamble. Listen carefully. These are time-tested techniques. Check-ins, acknowledge fills. Pair up traffic on a different frequency, move them off. If you have extra traffic, they can move up 5 kilohertz or 3, usually 3 if you're on HF, or to a pre-designated simplex or other repeater if you're on VHF and UHF. Explain your style if necessary, be concise, take frequent breaks, be aware of your tone of voice, ID often. Excuse me. In net disciplines, trained net members will report as soon as assigned. They will ask permission to call another station. You don't just get on and say, I want to talk to this guy and start talking. Ask the net control operator first. All messages, all traffic goes through the net control operator. Promptly when called, don't sit back and think that you have to wait. You're not on DMR. You're on the standard radio analog. You don't have to wait. Use tactical signs. That's a good thing to use if you're in an emergency. Tactical signs, once again, would be like shelter 1 to net control. Shelter 1 being a tactical call sign. And make sure that you ID at the end of each exchange. After you pass your message, ID again, follow protocol. And something that I had to be reminded a number of times, they're volunteers, they're not your employees. So don't treat them like somebody works for you. Accurate articulate, and I can't say it enough, articulate. Don't slur words when you're on the radio. There are a lot of people who just by their natural cadence of their voice need to train a little bit. Slow down, don't do rapid fire techniques. Select the best microphone, and that's important. That's something you do before you start the net. Yeah, noise canceling mics are great, and knowing how to set your radio up so that that microphone can work the best, that's where you, on HF, you're going to watch the ALC, automatic level control, to know when radio is operating properly. And the only way to do it actually on on a UHF, VHF, 2 meter, 440, whatever, the proper way is use a station monitor, which is an awfully expensive piece. You may want to have somebody listen to you when you're talking. They'll tell you if you're hitting the microphone properly. Omnidirectional mic hisses and pops. You don't want to pop words when you're speaking and hiss when you speak. For successful operation, use only plain English and standard pro words. Pro words are, Roger Wilco is not a pro word. Roger is. There is no Wilco that will comply. We don't use that. There are several that I think there's a list that I think Bob was developing a list that we're going to be working with for pro words. And again, plain English means no 10 codes, no Q signals, no CW shortcut put into English, use standard words. Short transmissions work best if you're keyed down and going on, as some people do. An emergency message may be trying to get through. Be aware of that. Scheduled nets should start on time. Be friendly, ask for assistance. Mistakes will be made, but you learn from them. Transmit only facts. Don't transmit conjecture. Don't editorialize. Standard ITU phonetics are definitely an important thing. Anybody have any questions or thoughts before we move on? Okay. Which is true. And this one is, where do we go? I'll just go through them this way. The NCS should ask for check-ins immediately after reading the opening script and periodically thereafter. And keep them, kind of short time between. In which order should a message be handled during an emergency? Priority first. Emergency, priority, health and welfare, and routine. That's B. That's your answer. Which of the following should the NCS operator not be expected of trained net members? Okay. Which of the following should not the NCS operator not expect of the trained members? You should not rely on exclusively on FCC call signs during that operation. Is really important because you don't know where that person is positioned for that particular drill or emergency. That's where the you got to know where they're at. Which of the following are appropriate to use an emergency phone net? Plain English and pro words, it's B. I always get a kick out of the 10 codes. A lot of people came into ham radio back in mid 70s from CB radio, and used to hear a lot of the 10 codes till others who were on the band said, stop doing that. Which is the best way to enlist the cooperation of the net? The best way is explain what you're doing in a calm and straightforward manner. Don't be demanding, don't criticize, and don't kick them off the net if they don't follow protocol. Just stay calm. So we're going for 10. The net manager. What's the net manager? He's responsible for planning the an operation of one or more nets. ARRL Job Description defines it. NTS and ARES. These are the areas that it comes in. And net manager also defines the net's purpose, sets a standard for the operation, handles the resource and training issues. And it's appointed position. Manager appoints or recommended by STM for NTS section manager. That's the EC, that's me. DEC is above it, that section is above a district and so forth. So that's who appoints them. And during emergencies, ad hoc nets may form and they can be assigned permanent or temporary net managers. There's your organizational chart. Section manager to the net manager and so forth. That's who's under who. There can be more than one net manager, separate net managers for NTS and ARES. They're coordinated by the section traffic and ARES communications plan. Small sections may have only one net manager. There are some small sections in the country. We're kind of a large section here, eastern section. There are multiple section net managers and station managers and so forth, and have an agreement between them. The duties: resource management, that's managing the people that are coming into your group. Quality control, again, it's part of training. Recruiting for special nets and so forth, that's all part of the things that we do. Assigning liaison stations to carry the messages. You have to have leadership skills and managing skills. And I didn't turn my my noisy things off here, so I do that. Message handling skills you also have to know. The net frequency in most cases is chosen by the net manager. Regular training nets always are usually on the same frequency all the time. Every time there's a net. Emergency communications declaration. If it's an emergency, you'll declare it that way. We all pretty set up requirements. The local club involved in it as well. Usually, we depending on the scope of the emergency, local clubs have resources that we all collect from people and so forth. Manage with tact and diplomacy. Yep. Know the people that are working with you. Organize practice nets, which we are looking at doing some more of that kind of stuff. Know where and how the nets fit into the overall structure. So currently, we have the Monday net. I'd like to see other nights come along as well with other versions of things to do, which as we grow into it, we will. And net managers points to ponder, identify liaison stations, assign alternate net control stations, gather information before activating the net, determine a location of served agencies, monitor a whole lot of what's going on. Training is crucial to success, so that's where all our training nets will come along. What are the requirements and qualifications for a ARRL net manager? The answer to that one is B, radio amateur license, full ARRL membership, and appropriate local or section qualifications. And to get those qualifications, local and all that, you do what you're doing. You go through here and get your task book signed and so forth. Which statement best describes the section manager's job? Section manager's job: coordinate and supervise traffic handling and net activities in that section. We're in the Eastern PA section. And which factor does not affect the number of net managers appointed to each station? What factor does not? That is the ARRL Emergency Preparedness Manager. So, what appointments? Who appoints the NTS Net Manager? Who added the section manager? Who is that section manager now? I think we're in limbo because section manager passed away. That's what I think his job was. Section manager report. He reports the section manager's work under the STM or the SEC, guided by the coordinated section of traffic or ARES communications plan. That's all part of some of the things that you covered before, I think. And we're coming up on, we'll do one more, and it's because I was so late getting this computer to work. We got kind of pulled. Number 11. Welcome back. Topic 11, section 3. This is the first of this one. National traffic system. Again, some of these things we've covered in other things. It's the national traffic system is a unique system to pass traffic. Started over 50 years ago, probably longer. Moves traffic from local to regional to national to local, so forth, back and forth. Usually health and welfare things, indicating that somebody's during an emergency, we found your grandmother kind of thing. It's not part of ARES. NTS is long distance, where ARES is local. These are, I wish I could remember. I had the radio on some of the frequencies. What I need to do is put them in a memory on my radio so that I can pull them. But it's around 3890 something is where I find them. The long distance areas or long distance NTS nets. 4 levels of nets for them. They work on FM, sideband, CW, IRLP, VOIP. Get anything, whatever it takes to get that message through. Local nets, small areas such as a town, usually use 2 meters and 70 centimeters. They're on scheduled times. The delivery is usually a local person that they're being sent to, and it has a liaison to the section nets. If it's something that has to go to further than your local, it goes to the section net. That liaison is the one who does that. Section nets handle traffic within the section, and they also handle the traffic from the liaison stations. It covers for local areas without a net. There are multiple net formats, and the liaison for the regional nets, they become that as a liaison to the regionals. And see, it starts local, goes section, then it'll go regional. And then the regional nets take the message wider area. They cover multiple sections. Net control station is designated by the regional net manager. It distributes traffic across the sections. And the liaisons, they're sending traffic up to higher level nets, and they also bring traffic from the higher level nets back down to the regional. And that is all administered by the ARRL headquarters. I guess you're starting to see why it's a good idea to be a member of the ARRL. And some people I know are not in this because they have, for some reason, do not want to be a member of the ARRL. And just a little bit about the ARRL, you'll find a lot of people saying good and bad about it, but they are the ones that keep us organized and trained. And it's not a bad thing to be a member. Area nets are top level of the net NTS system. So NCS is designated by the area net manager. Each region has a representative. Transcontinental Corp, Transcontinental Corp, and Eastern, Central, and Pacific areas. These are the ones that pass those messages along. And the Transcontinental Corp, TCC, is not an ARES. It's has designated liaisons, and it has priority messages between areas. Again, you'll find them on HF. And there you can see the local structure and so forth. Hotline Circuits, Refugee Center for the Red Cross. Those are, we get involved in those locally. They can happen anytime. Say fire in a community, explosions like they had in Baltimore recently, last week, and so forth. They'll have refugee centers set up because maybe there's a gas leak. They would have to move people out of an area or whatever it may be, flooding. Disasters, NTS is dedicated to ARES, SEC and STM. Scope is analyzed. Outbound traffic has priority when you're in these situations in a disaster, because they want to know what's going on locally. They want the messages to get out. That's the first priority. The SEC contacts the STM. That's the alerting system. STM contacts regional NTS net manager. Regional net manager contacts the NTS area net manager, and the area net manager contacts TCC. You can see how it goes right down the line. TCC prepares to set up the needed support, and then it all starts. General policy, self-alerting, check in regularly, self-starting, be flexible. That's your net. That's what you got to do. It's just another way to put it. Any questions, anybody? Okay, which of the following statements is true about the national traffic system? The true is it's a unique system for efficiently handling messages. The nets include which of the following? Area nets. They include the Eastern, the Central, and the Pacific. Which is the purpose of a hotline circuit? The hotline circuit is to move high volume of traffic between two locations during a disaster. Keywords, hotline circuit. Which of the following statement is true? Real quick, the regional nets exclusively handle traffic among sections within their region. And that's it. It's 8 o'clock, and I know that typically we get out of here at 8, so if everybody's okay, we can just call it at that. And I promise next time I'll have this darn thing working. I don't know how it got so convoluted. Let me find this here. Okay. Yeah, we had tried to do this in class last time, and found that it was more practical to do it here on the computer. And people were reluctant apparently to come out, and I'm okay doing it here.